Detective Explainer here. Today, I'm going to explain an erotic mystery film called Eyes Wide Shut. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It's a delightful night in New York City, and Bill and Alice Harford make preparations for the party they were invited to. The young and beautiful married couple says goodbye to their young daughter, Helena, who they leave with the babysitter. The Harfords arrive at the prestigious party where they are greeted by the host, Victor, and his wife, Ilona. Later, the men and women take up the dance floor, swaying to the music. Among them is Bill, who's sporting a crisp tuxedo, and his lovely wife Alice, wearing a sleek, black dress. During the dance, Bill tells Alice that the pianist in the band was a former classmate of his, Nick, who dropped out of medical school. Just then, the band takes a break for a few minutes, and Alice leaves to go to the bathroom. She and Bill agree to regroup at the bar. Meanwhile, Bill walks up and talks to his old friend, and Nick tells him that he's got a gig at the Sonata Cafe, inviting Bill to see him there soon. As they had agreed on, Alice waits for her husband at the bar. She takes a sip of her champagne, then sets the glass down. Suddenly, a distinguished man with graying hair takes the glass of champagne. She remarks that it's hers, and the man responds by drinking from the glass. He then introduces himself as Shandor Savast. Shandor is immediately captivated by Alice and tries to flirt with her. She informs him that she's married, but she does so in a very provocative way. Shandor insists that the two of them dance, and Alice agrees. From there, she remains consistently flirtatious with Shandor throughout the entire dance. Eventually, Alice and Shandor spot Bill from afar as he speaks with two young women. Seeing this prompts Alice to be even more amorous towards Shandor out of spite. Simultaneously, Bill is becoming increasingly flirtatious with the beautiful ladies. The two women proceed to each take an arm as they start leading Bill somewhere. Before they can get to their destination, a man interrupts the trio. The man says that Victor is seeking Bill due to a medical emergency. Bill takes his leave and goes to see him. Victor is hurriedly putting on his clothes while panicking over the unconscious, naked woman in his room. When Bill shows up, he examines the woman and asks Victor what exactly happened. Mandy took some drugs, and she suddenly fell unconscious. Bill calls Mandy by name to see if she'll respond. After getting and sustaining Mandy's attention, he manages to get her back to her senses. Bill then recommends that she rest for an hour, then instructs Victor to have someone take her home. Meanwhile, Alice breaks out of her amorous spell, and she firmly tells Shandor that she has to leave. Later that night, the Harfords return to their home. The two of them stand naked in front of the mirror, leaving their beautiful bodies bare. With that, they kiss passionately without knowing how close to infidelity each of them was that evening. The next day provides no excitement whatsoever for the Harfords. Bill works at the hospital, examining one patient to another. As for Alice, she and her daughter Helena remain at home, wrapping their Christmas presents. During that evening, Alice prepares a joint for her and Bill to share. In their bedroom, Alice suddenly asks Bill about the two young women that he was speaking to last night at the party. Bill denies that he was hitting on them, but Alice continues to be antagonistic about it. She appears to be in a volatile and emotional state as she continues to goad her husband into an argument. In turn, Alice's sudden burst of aggressive energy exasperates him. She becomes furious that Bill never seems to be jealous, and he tells her that it's because he has faith in her. Alice then maliciously recounts a vacation they once had in Cape Cod, where they saw a naval officer who she was deeply attracted to. Alice tells Bill that she was immensely aroused by that stranger the entire time she was with Bill and their daughter. She even admits to contemplating having an affair with him and giving up her marriage and her daughter. Bill sits speechless in both horror and disbelief at the words that came from his wife. Suddenly, during the intense lull that set in, a phone call arrives for Bill. His patient, Lou Nathanson, had just died. And he tells Alice that he thinks he needs to go there and show his face. With that, Bill leaves Alice in the middle of their emotionally charged argument. Bill takes a cab on the way to the apartment, and the entire time, he just couldn't shake the greatly disturbing image of his wife and some random naval officer making love. When Bill arrives at the apartment, he is greeted by Lou's very distraught daughter, Marion. She explains that she left her father in the room, thinking that he was just sleeping, but she realized later on that he was no longer breathing. Bill offers her some comforting words, and Marion tearfully thanks him. Marion then starts talking about her boyfriend Carl, saying that they'll be married soon and will be moving to Michigan. Suddenly, something bizarre happens. Without warning, Marion kisses Bill passionately. She professes her love to him, leaving the married man in complete shock. Bill proposes that she might be heavily distraught from grieving her father and that she doesn't know what she's saying or doing. Still, Marion insists that she loves him, and she doesn't want to go to Michigan because she wants at the very least to live near him. Just then, a doorbell rings, and Carl arrives. Carl goes to kiss Marion and comfort her, then walks up to Bill to greet him. This when Bill takes his leave. And Marion is left in shock as she watches Bill walk away after her daring confession of love. Bill walks down the streets of New York, and he's left to make his way home on foot. Still, he is bothered by the idea of a random stranger deeply arousing his wife, practically turning her into a needy and desperate mess. As he crosses the street, Bill is followed by a young woman in a fur coat. The woman flirts with him before inviting him to her apartment, which is only a few steps away. Bill agrees, and he follows the call girl into her place, where the two of them agree on a price. They begin to kiss one another, but suddenly, Bill's phone rings. Alice is on the line, asking him what time will he be home. Bill lies and says he's still at the Nathanson residence. Then, he adds that it will take him some time before he could go home. With a sudden change of heart, Bill pays the woman and leaves. Once again, he's walking down the street, and he happens upon the Sonata Cafe. From outside, he sees the picture of his old friend Nick billed as the pianist for the night. Bill decides to see his friend. In the cafe, he sits down and orders a beer while he's waiting for Nick, who had just finished playing. When Nick sees Bill from the table, he goes to sit with him. He lets Bill know that he'll be performing again that evening in an undisclosed location. Nick starts recounting that secret party. He had to play the piano blindfolded, and when the blindfold went loose, he had never seen anything like what he saw there in the world. Suddenly, Nick gets a call, informing him of the party's address and the password for it. Bill then persuades Nick to bring him to this mysterious party, but Nick tells Bill that he needs a costume and a mask to get in. Bill goes to see Peter Grenning, his former patient and the owner of a costume store called Rainbow Fashion. Much to Bill's disappointment, Peter had already moved to Chicago. And his store is now owned by Mr. Millick. Luckily, Mr. Millick is willing to help Bill get a costume for an additional charge. In the costume room, Bill requests a cloak with a hood, a mask, and a tuxedo. Then, Millick and Bill make their way through the hall of costumes. As Millick searches for the cloak, he suddenly hears a thud coming from his office at the end of the hall. Millick is surprised to see a table of food that had been left there. He hears a man sneeze from behind the closet, and he soon finds two men and his teenage daughter all in their underwear. Furious, Millick and Bill are in the hall. Millick traps the two men in the office while Millick's daughter runs up to Bill and embraces him. She flirtatiously smiles at him as she holds him close. Millick orders his daughter to leave, and Millick gets back to searching for Bill's cloak. Inside the cab on the way to the party, Bill's thoughts about his wife and the naval officer become darker and more depraved. The cab stops to reveal a large gate painted in blue with two men guarding it. Bill pays the taxi an additional charge to wait for him before he goes to the gate. There, he speaks with the two men, then gives the password, Fidelio, which means fidelity. They then lead him to a large mansion. He goes inside and puts on his cloak and mask. There, Bill finds the most bizarre thing he has seen in his life. Several individuals are wearing the same cloak as he is, with each sporting a Venetian mask. In the middle of the room is a red-cloaked man holding a scepter. He is surrounded by people in black cloaks arranged in a circle. He bangs his scepter, and the black cloaks fall off, revealing several beautiful and naked women. With the ritual ongoing, each woman kisses the next person on their right through the opera mask. The sensual ritual ends when the kisses reach the full circle, and the master in the red cloak bangs his scepter in front of each woman. They each stand up and leave one by one. One woman wearing a black feathered mask walks up to Bill, then warns him to leave as he is in great danger. Confused, Bill asks the woman to show who she is, but she refuses to answer. The two of them are separated when a man with a priest mask walks up to the woman and takes her with him. Then, Bill begins to tour the mansion, eventually finding several men and women hooking up in groups. Bill is left dumbfounded as he discovers what seems to be an exclusive carnal club for the elite. Suddenly, the woman in the black feathered mask returns, and once again, she tries to convince Bill to leave. After failing to persuade him, the woman walks off, and Bill is approached by a butler who tells him to come with him. The butler takes Bill to a room where the master is sat in a chair. All around him are several members of the club wearing their black cloaks. With all eyes on Bill, he is interrogated by the master, who's asking for the password. Bill says Fidelio and the master says that is the password for admittance, but he is asking for the password of the house. Bill lies about forgetting what it was, and the master becomes enraged. He then demands Bill take off his clothes. Before he could, the woman in the black feathered mask appears, demanding that they let Bill go. In exchange, she will be the one to redeem him. The master accepts and lets Bill go with the condition that he never tells anyone, otherwise there will be consequences for him and his family. Before he leaves, Bill asks what will happen to the woman in the black feathered mask. The master ominously replies that no one can change her fate now. Bill returns home at around 4 a.m. He hides his costume on a small desk, then goes to the bedroom to find Alice laughing out loud in her sleep. Bill decides to wake her up because he thought she might be having a nightmare. Alice wakes up crying, saying that she had a horrible dream. She then tells Bill about how she was in a deserted city with Bill, and they were naked. She felt awful and ashamed, and she also felt angry at Bill because she thought it was his fault. Bill left to find clothes for them, but the dream suddenly changed. She was lying naked under the sun in a beautiful garden, and from out of the woods, the naval officer came to her, and they made love. 100 men appeared and surrounded her out of nowhere, and she did it with all of them. She then realized that Bill was watching her in the arms of all of those men. She started to laugh because she wanted to make fun of Bill, so she laughed as hard as she could. Alice now cries in Bill's arms, and Bill sits in complete horror and awe after hearing his wife's depraved dream. The next morning, Bill goes down to the Sonata Cafe to look for Nick. The cafe seems to be closed since it's too early, so Bill goes into the adjacent diner, where he orders a cup of coffee. There, he asks the waitress if she happened to know Nick, and she says she does. After lying about a medical emergency, Bill receives Nick's address from the waitress. Bill then drops by the hotel where Nick is, and he is greeted by the receptionist, who says that Nick had checked out already. He explains that Nick checked out at 5 a.m. with big burly men accompanying him. The receptionist even mentions that Nick looked scared. Bill takes his leave then heads to Rainbow Fashion to return the costume. There, he's surprised to find that the mask is missing. Suddenly, Milik's daughter comes out of the back room wearing only a robe. The two men that Milik had locked in the office last night come out of the back room, too, surprising Bill. He asks Milik about this, saying that he thought that he was going to call the police. Milik explains that they came to some other arrangement, implying that they had paid money to have their way with Milik's daughter, which Milik himself approved of. Milik then remarks that Bill is welcome to anything he wants, even if it's not a costume. As Milik says this, he puts his arm around his teenage daughter. Bill makes his way back to the mansion. He walks up to the blue gate, and a security camera catches him looking. Then, a car drives up from the other side of the gate. An old man steps out of the car and hands Bill a letter directly addressed to him in his full name. The letter reads, "Give up your inquiries which are completely useless and consider these words a second warning. We hope for your own good, that this will be sufficient." When Bill returns home, he finds Alice helping their daughter with homework. He then tells Alice they should have dinner early because he has an appointment that evening. Bill goes to the kitchen to get a drink, and Alice smiles at him. Bill smiles back, all while having disturbing thoughts running through his head about Alice's dream last night. Bill goes back to his office, where he calls the Nathanson residence, hoping Miriam will pick up. To his disappointment, it's her boyfriend Carl who picks up the phone. When he heard Carl on the other end, he hangs up. Bill then heads to the apartment of the call girl he met, but her roommate Sally is the only one there. Sally invites Bill into the apartment, where they start flirtatiously touching one another. Suddenly, Sally tells Bill that the call girl named Domino tested HIV positive this morning, and she doesn't think that she'll be coming back anytime soon. With this, Bill leaves the apartment. As he walks the street at night, he's closely being followed by a bald man in a brown coat. Bill tries to evade him, but the bald man follows his trail closely. Bill then stops by a newspaper stand to wait for the bald man's next move. The man finally walks off, leaving Bill alone. Bill buys a newspaper, and he enters a nearby cafe where he orders a cappuccino. While waiting for his order, he reads an article in the newspaper with a headline stating, "Ex-beauty queen in hotel drugs overdose." The name of the woman was Amanda. This is when Bill realizes that the woman in the black feathered mask was Mandy, the woman he helped in Victor's party. Bill makes his way to the hospital where Mandy is and is shocked to discover that she's already dead. Bill then visits her body in the morgue where he is horrified at what happened to her. On his way out, he receives a call from Victor, who asks him to come to his home. Bill arrives at Victor's house and there, Victor confronts Bill about what happened the previous night. He goes on to explain that he saw everything that had happened. Bill is initially worried about Nick, but Victor assures him that Nick is alive. He also says that the entire thing with the woman warning him was just some sort of charade to scare him. Of course, this makes Bill mad, and he asserts that charades don't end up with people turning up dead. Bill then hands Victor a cutout piece of the newspaper with the article about Mandy. To this, Victor claims that Mandy had a drug overdose. She wasn't killed. After the confrontation, Bill comes back home to his apartment. There, he sees his missing opera mask lying next to Alice, who's still sleeping. The weight of the events has finally taken its toll on Bill, and upon seeing the mask, he breaks down crying, which wakes Alice. Bill could only promise that he'll tell her everything. The next morning, both Bill and Alice are in tears from Bill's story. She tells him that Helena will wake up soon, and she expects them to take her Christmas shopping. At the store, Bill and Alice accompany their daughter. The two of them are quiet, intense. Bill asks Alice what they should do, to which Alice replies that they should be grateful that they've managed to survive through all their adventures, whether they were real or only a dream. When asked is she sure of that, Alice says that she's only as sure as she is that the reality of one night, let alone a whole lifetime, can ever be the whole truth. To this, Bill replies, and no dream is ever just a dream. Alice nods in agreement and tells Bill that the important thing is they're awake now, and hopefully, for a long time to come. Bill then says, forever, which scares Alice, and she says that the word frightens her. She goes on to profess that she loves him, and they need to make love again very soon. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.